Thank you for joining me. So in the last lecture, we talked in depth about the neural networks and how the neurons form new synaptic connections when creating a new mind. Let us now look at this a bit closely and look at the anatomy of the brain. I'm not a good drawer, but I tried. And let's look at the anatomy of the brain and actually see what is going on internally as we are firing and wiring new information. So the first part of the brain is the outer layer of the brain, which is called the neocortex or the frontal lobe. And this is considered to be the first brain. The function of this brain is to consolidate information. So do you remember when we talked about when you're learning new information or when you're learning a new skill and your neurons are creating a specific pattern to solidify that understanding until it becomes automatic? This is done by this section of the brain. This is your first brain. It is called your neocortex. It is your rational mind. Okay, this is where knowledge is consolidated into different neural networks. Now, what are the neural networks? They're called electrical impulses or thoughts. So if we took a brain scan right now, a live brain scan, if we put you under the machine and look at how your brain is functioning when you're having a thought, you will see an electric current go this way, an electric current go that way, an electric current go this way. And these are basically electrical impulses with a specific pattern as you're learning new information. Okay, now there is a second brain in the larger structure of our brain, and that is called the limbic brain. Okay, and the limbic brain is simply the emotional brain. Okay, so remember we talked about this. When thoughts are knowledge that you're taking on, there is an emotional component. So you've got your stimulus and you've got your response, right? So this response in the brain circuitry is stored in the limbic brain or the second brain or the emotional brain. Okay, and it's right here, this little component over here. This is called the limbic brain. And this huge network of neurons, like this largest area over here in blue, that is your neocortex, that is your rational mind. This is where you gather knowledge. So trillions and trillions of neural networks here are firing and wiring as you and I are talking and consolidating this information into the brain circuitry of our brain. This is being taken care of by the frontal lobe or the neocortex. The emotional brain is right here within, at the center of this mass, and it is called the limbic brain. This is where emotions are processed. So when you're learning a new information and you're able to harmonize that within your emotional circuitry, this happens in this component, in the limbic brain. The third brain is what's called the reptilian brain. This is this component in red. This is called the reptilian brain, and this is the brain that we have had from time immemorial because this is your survival brain. This is where your flight and fright response happens. Okay, so if you're ever under danger, your reptilian brain will kick in. It's not going to sit there, go through the warehouse to see what possible things it can do. It doesn't have time. It's instinctive and it's going to think of protecting you. This is its job. Okay? So within our brain, we have these three brains working inside of us in tandem. Okay? So how does this connect all together? So as we said earlier, whenever your brain is transforming, it transforms under two conditions. One, where it's been given novel information, or second, when an event has happened that is so strong that it changes you, it alters you, okay, good or bad. All right, you're no longer the same person after that event has happened to you. And this is how you're being altered on a constant basis. Okay, so if learning is making new synaptic connections, then remembering and maintaining these connections is also important. So think about this neural network as a community of people, like families and friends, right? So as they're communicating with each other and constructing new information and creating a new mind, every time you learn a new information, you're evolving your brain, you have to continue to maintain those relationships. So it's just like being married or dating, you have to have investment. You've got to have the time. You've got to revisit the information. You've got to learn from each other. You've got to try again and fight and break up and retry until something is solidified. Okay? So this is exactly how it works. These neural networks are basically community of neurons within your brain that are constantly talking to each other via thought patterns or impulses, right? And you're constantly in communication with each other. And the more you visit this information, the more you rehearse that information, the more you mentally rehearse this information, it becomes embedded into your first brain, which is the brain of rational thinking. Okay, it is knowledge-based. But when you start absorbing this information at an emotional level, right? So when you're starting to have an emotional attachment to the information that you're reading, right? Like, has that ever happened to you? You read something and you're like, oh my God, I know exactly what this means. I felt it viscerally in my body. That visceralness is stored in the limbic brain. That is your emotional response to the stimulus in your frontal lobe, in your neocortex. Okay, and we want this limbic brain to be activated. We want this to happen because it is the communication between the mind and the body that creates a personality that is much different than the one you had before. And this is why knowledge is for the mind, but emotions and experiences are for the body. So let's take an example. During 9/11, everyone remembers that horrific day. Probably all of us can account for what we were doing, where we were, the day we received that news. Okay, we may have forgotten what we had for dinner last night, but 9/11 was a key moment that altered all of us. I can remember exactly where I was when that had happened. So when an event happens where you are altered beyond imagination, that is in the limbic brain, because you can remember how you felt when this event had happened, where you were. You can remember the exact circumstance, right? And so you have been altered and you've created a mind around that event. Okay? Now, how does this information help us? Well, supposing in my old reality, I am tired of fighting with my ex, all right? Because I was engaged to my ex and then he cheated on me with my best friend. Okay, and I could then say, of course this is hypothetical, guys, but I could then say that that event altered me completely because it caused me obviously to break up with him, but the fact that there was a betrayal at such a huge scale while everyone else knew except for myself altered me. It altered me in my biologically, chemically. I was a different person. I was altered. I could never trust men again. So you can say that that event basically caused my brain to take a snapshot of the two people who were engaged in betrayal, okay, and had an emotional repercussion on my state of being. Okay, and now the brain has been altered and it has a mind that does not trust men. Now, suppose all these years have passed by, I'm married and I have a great life, right? And there's a reunion in a place, in a community place, where I happen to see my ex-fiance and his then girlfriend and now wife together. What will happen? Now, two things can happen. I have gathered all this knowledge about self-empowerment, self-love, healing through tragedy, healing through trauma, right? And it's all stored in the frontal lobe, in the neocortex. This is knowledge, right? Now, I could talk greatly about self-love and self-empathy and being able to learn from your mistakes. This was all hardwired in my brain, in the analytical feature of my brain. And to a certain degree, I even gave myself grace and I emotionally embraced that truth. That's why I was able to continue on with my life and have a family of my own and find love all over again, right? So now two things can happen when I walk into that community where I see my ex and his wife two things can happen. Either I can go into survival, right, which is basically going into the warehouse, into the limbic brain, where there was an emotion that had altered me forever, right? And it basically recalls that emotion. I'm able to recall that emotion of betrayal. And one possibility is that my survival mode kicks in. That means I'm going to fight, I'm going to hide, or I'm going to run away. Now, this was a primitive system that is used for survival. When was it important? When we lived back then in the caves, when we were trying to save ourselves from predators. But today, the image of a predator doesn't have to be a lion. It doesn't have to be a bear. My ex-fiance was good enough to create the same primal response. And this happens so seamlessly that it doesn't matter how much knowledge I've gathered. It doesn't matter how much I evolved. The moment I see that person and I have been altered beyond doubt, my reptilian brain will kick in. The survival mode will kick in. I may give him cut eyes. I may ignore him. I may not even go. And there goes a good time that I could have potentially had, but it's not possible because of the survival mechanism that's in here. So then what happens is, when this reptilian brain kicks in, remember we're neurochemical, right? So the brain says, all right, emergency, emergency, emergency. The limbic brain is activated, right? And it's flight or fright. It's not feeling good. What does it start to do? It starts releasing a chemical into your body that says, run, 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 fight, 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 fight. How do you know that? Because your heart rate starts increasing. Has that ever happened to you? You go into an exam, you have an anxiety attack, you've prepared for the exam, you know the paper is going to come on your table. You took breaths, you meditated, you counted till 10, and when the paper came, you blanked out. It's that automatic. Okay? So this is how quickly the system kicks in, because you can't fool your body. All right? Now, the second possibility is that you've gathered all this information about self-love, you have embodied it for a great part of your life. You've embodied this message, you believe in it. So just before hitting that community hall and looking at them walk together, right, is going to probably have a different response. You may just take a moment, sit back, not rushing into that hall, and check in with yourself and say, wait a minute, I do have great love and compassion for myself. I have done a lot of work in the last 10 years on myself. I'm worthy. Here's my husband. Here are my children. I love myself. There is nothing that can hinder me past this point. Now, this is not just logical, right? Because you can't fool your body. But when you take a moment back and you're reassessing in your entire neurocircuitry with regards to the new mind that you've created of self-love, of self-worth, right? These neurons are firing together and they're informing the limbic brain. And they're saying, wait a minute, there's two emotions happening at the same time. But listen, this too is a possibility. You need not leave the party. You need not hide. You need not fight. In fact, you need not do anything. You're sufficient unto yourself. The moment that happens, the reptilian brain shuts off and it says, I'm not needed. It's not dangerous. Right? So in those two events, you can go survival, your reptilian brain can kick in. And so a system that was adaptive becomes extremely maladaptive because the release of stress hormones that inhabit your body because you're feeling that your ex and his wife are no less than a dinosaur is ridiculous. And what has happened in the past is when we lived in the caves, it was a short-term maladaptation. It was a survival mechanism to protect your body. It was very short-lived. But now what has happened is you look at your ex and his wife in that moment and you magnify that moment, and that moment now is no longer a moment. You've tracked back 10 years, you've recalled every single memory in your repository there, and you just shifted to the old mind. And now your body does not know the difference between thought and the experience because they're both embedded here. So your body doesn't even know that this is a memory. It feels like it's living that moment all over again, and you continuously torture yourself through that process, and your survival system never turns off. This is an invitation to a disease because your body can only keep up with survival for so long. The heart can only beat rapidly for so long. It cannot go on forever. Okay, so what was adaptive now becomes extremely maladaptive. The toxins that are released in the body as a result of the stress hormones alter your proteins, your DNA, the very foundations that hold your system together are weakened. Okay? On the other hand, if you've gathered the knowledge and you've embodied that knowledge and you have put it in practice, so this is not a one-time thing that you saw your fiance, but you took the greater road and you embodied this philosophy of love and compassion, and then you forgot about it. You can't be a saint just by one event. You have to repeat and repeat and repeat until it becomes a new mind. So much so that you could have 10 of those events happen to you simultaneously in different aspects, and you would still be unaffected because you know how to master yourself, not the other, but yourself, because you know the consequence of relapsing. You create the same reality. Okay, and if you want to create new reality, if you want to be the new you, then you understand that you do not want to activate this reptilian system. You do not want to go there because that's going to create your old reality. You want to rise above. And this is how knowledge is for the mind, experience is for the body, and that environment, that instance that created the trauma now has no effect on you, not because you're pretending, but because you've risen above it. You have altered yourself. And so that very trauma now does not have an emotional pull on you, which means that that event now becomes wisdom. All right? Okay. So finally, to the part that I've been talking about a very long time. Let's talk about the mind, right? So we've talked about this neural networks, we've talked about the brain. All right, so what is the conscious mind? What is the subconscious mind? We all know what it is, but let's go through the mechanics, okay, of what it is. So I've created this thing here just to show you simultaneously how the person sort of evolves in this hierarchy of brain waves, right, that we're going to talk about, and how the conscious mind and the analytical mind and the subconscious mind are intertwined together. Okay, so how do we start this? All right, so let me first talk about the aspects of the mind as well. So we've got our conscious mind, okay, we've got our analytical mind, which is like a small strip here, right? And then we've got our subconscious mind. Okay, so what are the subconscious minds? So the subconscious minds are basically what we talked about earlier, you know, belief systems that have been programmed inside of us that we're not even consciously aware of. Okay, so what do we mean by belief systems? Others' opinions, things like big boys don't cry, girls should just look pretty and be quiet. Oh, you're just like your father, you're just like your mother, you will always be poor, money is the root cause of all evil, all these things. Okay, belief systems. Now, why do they get ingrained in our subconscious level? Because when you are developing, so in the first 6 years of your age, okay, psychology shows in the first 6 years of your age, you are in a very, 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 very suggestible program. How do we know that? Because it's it's in relation to the brain wave. Okay, so I'm going to start talking about two different things here simultaneously. So we have, in the first 6 years of a child's life, the child is under theta brainwave pattern. And this theta brainwave pattern is a lucid state, okay, in which there is no analytical facility right now. There is no analytical faculty. There is no rational faculty. Okay, the conscious mind is not even there yet. The analytical mind, the doubting mind, the calculative mind is not there yet. Okay, so the child is 100% like an open door. You put whatever you want to put in it. Okay, so caretakers who take care, parents who are raising their children, should know that the first 6 years of the life of that child is entirely in their hands. Because anything you say past that point is going to create the foundation of who they will be much later without them actively even knowing about it. Okay? So this is the theta state of the brainwave. How do we know it's theta? Because it can be measured. It can be measured, okay? So things like you're not good enough, nothing ever works out for you, or we're cursed, we're destined to fail, you're just gonna have to work much harder than the rest of your peers to make it in life. Such things, opinions that we just throw out without even consciously being aware of what we're doing. Okay, and so this happens when the child is in theta. Okay, extremely suggestible. Now from 6 to 9 years, okay, the child begins to develop the analytical faculty. Okay, so when we talk about the analytical faculty, it's just that you start analyzing information. So you start creating a filter. So if you think about the analytical mind, it's a filter now. It's creating a filter. So you'll see when kids are around 9 years old, they're not really listening to you much. They'll say, well, why? I don't think so. I'm not sure if I agree with that, right? That happens because their analytical faculty now is beginning to develop. Okay, from that point onwards. And the brainwave that accompanies that is low-level beta, okay? Or high-level alpha. So between those ranges, alpha and beta, low-level beta, high-level alpha, is where the analytical mind is being formed. So you're still innocent, you'll still trust, but you're still questioning. You're still filtering information that suits you now. Okay, so you've got alpha and low-level beta at the range of the analytical mind when the analytical mind is being formed. And then lastly, and this obviously happens between the ages of 6 and 9. Now from 9 years onwards, you start developing your conscious mind. Okay, and that mind now resonates in beta. It's all beta. Okay, it's just beta. So you can have, if you are in homeostasis, that means you're not threatened, you're having a good day, you are in low-level beta. Okay, but if you're sitting for an exam and you have to pay attention to what the instructor is saying to you before writing that exam, you are in mid-range beta. Okay, you're paying more attention to your external environment. So beta is all about paying attention to your environment. When you're relaxed, you're low-level beta. When you have to pay attention to a specific instruction, you're mid-range beta. But when you're in survival, you are in extremely high-level beta because you're just narrowing your focus to see where the predator is so you can protect yourself, right? So those are high-level beta. So these brainwaves have a direct influence on your heart rate, right? Onto your body because chemicals are being released. So just to recap one more time, when children are less than 6 years old, they're in theta. It's a dream, not a dream state, but it's a lucid state, okay? Where they're like sponges. They will absorb anything you tell them. From the ages of 6 and 9, they're oscillating between alpha and low-level beta. Extremely low-level beta, more alpha. Okay, and that's when the analytical faculty is being formed and they're still in between worlds, right? But the analytical faculty is developing. They're learning now. They're AIs. They're understanding things, right? And filtering information out. And then from 9 onwards up to the age of 35, your conscious mind now, your rational mind, your logical mind is fully developed. Okay? Now, and the brainwave there is beta. Okay? Now, the conscious mind, which is your logical and reasoning mind, right? Which the frontal lobe is in charge of, which is what we talked about here earlier. This represents only 5% of you. This is only 5%. Okay? 95% of your actions and your thoughts are a result of your subconscious mind. 95% is your subconscious. Right here. Okay? So, and the analytical faculty is what separates the conscious mind from the subconscious mind. Okay? So let me say this another way. All the information that you're listening to right now, okay? You're developing, you're creating new minds, right? You're creating a new neural network, right? But this is in the domain of your conscious mind, 5%. Okay? You've got the analytical faculty, which simply means that now you will doubt more, you will not believe as easy as you did, you will not surrender to the information as easily as you did when you were a kid, because the analytical faculty says, wait, who is she to tell me this? What are her credentials? What are her qualifications? Does she even know what she's talking about? That's the filter. Okay? So one can say that the less evolved, I'm not saying you be dumb, but what I'm saying is the younger you are, the more suggestible you are, because your analytical faculties are not developed yet. But the more analytical you get, the less suggestible you are. Okay? So conscious mind, 5%, subconscious mind, 95%. That's your personality. So the question is, so the statement is, okay, by the age of 35, we would have memorized a set of behaviors, attitudes, beliefs, emotional reactions, habits that are now subconsciously programmed in our brain. It's done. So this is why people struggle with positive thinking. Why do they struggle? I'm not saying it's not possible. I'm saying it's a struggle because you're using 5% of your conscious mind to override 95% of the belief systems that you agree with, and you don't even know that you agree with it. So you're split. Do you know what I mean? You may say something, but you don't believe it. You may see miracles happen for other people, and you wonder why it doesn't happen to you. Because at a very subconscious level, you don't believe you're worthy. Because belief of worthlessness is your truth. And this is powerful. Please pay attention to this. This is powerful. And we're not even aware that we have those belief systems. Okay? And therefore, when you hit any new information here from your neocortex, you're using your conscious mind to accomplish that. You must make sure that it's hitting the right place here in your body. It's got to believe it. It's got to believe it. Otherwise, it's not going past the brainstem. Nothing new is going to happen to you. You're faking it. But you are not to fake it. You are to believe it. But how can you believe something if you've got subconscious programming that you're not even aware of? So then the solution is that nothing can be done at the conscious level. It's done. By the age of 35, you're crystallized. Remember we said that the brain had become fixed. It's fixed. These neural networks have been programmed in such a way that they've crystallized. They are so crystallized in their way of being that you don't even know anymore how to think, what to think. That's why it becomes an impossible feat to change your personal reality. You're going to control everything in your environment because everything in your environment will be a trigger. But how much in your environment are you going to control? Because to control is to activate your reptilian brain. To obsess means you're zooming in on the cause. It could be anybody. It could be your ex. It could be your pet. It could be your coworker who's acting like a predator, who's making your life miserable. You're activating the survival mode. You've got impressions from your subconscious mind that are stored in your limbic emotional brain that says, fool me once, I'm not falling for it again. You've got your analytical faculty that says, don't trust. Don't trust. Karma will come to bite them. How are you ever going to get happiness? This is why it's important to address the subconscious mind. Now, the only way you can address the subconscious mind is to come down to the brain wave activity, the door to it. And this is where the theta brainwave is important. Theta is the door of entrance. It is the door into your subconscious world. It is that point where the system says, thank God, she's out. How do you know that? Because when you enter theta, the lights in the frontal lobe turns off. The analytical faculty is turned off. And now you have access inside here into your subconscious. And this is where you can start reprogramming your belief systems. This is where you begin to believe in possibilities. This is where you begin to believe that you can become a new person, a new version of yourself. All right, so this basically concludes the presentation on brainwave and the mind. All right, and so when we're running a typical program, we're running a fixed set of routines. We're programmable. We've fallen into a 3D reality. When we begin to change our mind by gathering knowledge and making it experiential in our body through our emotions, by accessing that level of subconscious depth through awareness. Remember, who's doing this? Consciousness. What's consciousness? Awareness. Awareness of what? Energy. Energy where? In your subconscious programming. Now, how do you know that you're putting your energy in your subconscious programming? Well, this is how your conscious mind can help you. What are your thoughts on a typical given day? What are your thoughts? If your thoughts are of hopelessness, chances are it's been conditioned here. If your thoughts are of misery, chances are it's been conditioned here. If your thoughts is where your energy goes, then see where your energy goes in a given day. If you're able to see that 90% of your thoughts are self-sabotaging, then you've got to address this. All right? And this can only be done at the subconscious level. I hope you enjoyed.